What's going on? Jake here with Uncommon EDC, and today we're going to be taking a look at the Rosecraft Blades Cockleburr Creek Trapper, and this one comes to me by way of the Rosecraft Pass Around group. However, it is available on their website for $61.99, and of course I'll make sure to leave a link in the description where you can find this one. If you prefer to find it yourself, you can search for model RCT019. Now, as far as slip joint patterns go, anyone who's really even vaguely interested in slip joints has probably heard of the Trapper pattern, and that's because outside of the Barlow, this is probably the most recognizable pattern, very popular one. And despite this one having modern construction and some of Andy Armstrong's design elements added to it, like the swedging at the tip of the blades, a little bit more of a pronounced curve to the interior of the handle, and then things that we see with a lot of the Rosecraft traditionals, things like nickel silver pins instead of brass pins, or the Rosebud shield or fluted bolsters. Despite all that though, this one manages to feel extremely traditional. It feels like he stayed very true to the original design here, and the covers just add to that. You get these rosewood covers that add to that traditional lens, and really well executed rosewood. I don't have a lot of wood covers in my collection, but this definitely has me reconsidering. The grain in this is absolutely beautiful, just a lot of texture there, and you can even see some of the variants from the show side over to our pal side covers, and that's one of the things I love so much about natural cover materials, that you get so much variance. No two are going to be exactly identical, so love seeing that, and this rosewood turned out beautiful in my opinion. Now, as far as fit and finish goes, you can always expect a pretty much impeccable fit and finish from Rosecraft. That starts with things like the centering. You can see both of those blades are right down the center, and as well as things like stepping, you're not going to have any of that. That goes from our covers. Obviously our pins and our shield are going to be fully flush, all the way down to the springs and liners. We're not going to have any stepping or gapping of any sort. You won't have cracks around the pins or anything like that. They just always do a great job with their fit and finish, and I think that extends to the walk and talk as well. And so this one is pretty, I guess, down the middle. I'd say maybe a 5.5 on both blades. They feel very consistent and even from our main blade to our secondary blade, although the nail nick placement is a little bit different. So you can see on the main blade, our clip point, it's closer to the pivot, so it might feel slightly heavier than our spey blade. I feel like they feel identical, but because this one's further from the pivot, it might feel just a hair lighter, and that's always the case when you're pulling from farther away from the pivot, and so that one might feel a little bit easier to open. No pinch grip on this, obviously, because it is a two-bladed knife. We're not going to be able to pinch and pull, so you do need to utilize those nail nicks, but plenty of access into them and nice snappy action. About, again, a 5.5. Very smooth and consistent from close to half stop, and from our half stop to fully deployed. Feels like the same pull weight, and then again, really great acoustics, which we can listen to here. And that goes for both our clip point and our spey blade. So again, main blade is our clip point, and he stayed true to the blade shapes that come in a traditional trapper. I know that's kind of a point of contention for a lot of people with trappers, is 99% of the people carrying a trapper aren't using the spey blade for spaying animals. So it goes to argue that maybe you could replace that with a more useful blade shape. However, I do think he wanted to stay true to the traditional design, especially on such a recognizable pattern. So it makes sense to stick with that, and you can still use these very effectively. So you can use your clip point, for example, as your all-around utility blade, and then use that spey blade for a sterile blade, where you use it for like food prep, or just a backup to have a secondary sharpened edge when that one dulls on you, so you don't have to sharpen midday. And so still have plenty of utility even if you're not using it for a spey blade. As far as the blades themselves go, both are going to be 3.25 inches, bringing our overall length to about 7.4 inches when open. Have D2 steel. Of course, we have some swedging at the tip. I'm not sure if it's just me, I'm not comparing them side by side, but the swedging does feel a little bit more subtle on this pattern than we typically see from his designs. Rosecraft stamp on our tang, and then on the back we have the D2 steel, the RCT019 and Andy's maker's mark etched onto the palisade tang. Again, really nice snappy action as well. You have that half stop that it jumps into, and then into our close. And of course we have our spey blade, which I mentioned already. We have the more forward nail nick, so this one does feel a little bit lighter, but also very smooth and snappy, jumps into each position, and you can see again a pretty subtle swedge overall at that tip. We also have the same markings on this blade, so if we take a look at the palisade tang, we have Andy's maker's mark, D2 steel, and RCT019. Flipping it to the other side, we have that Rosecraft stamp, and again, a 3 1/4 inch D2 steel blade on that Spey blade. So we'll get that closed up and just take a look at some of the other touches. I already mentioned the nickel silver pins, all completely flush there. We have the Rosebud shield, which I'm actually a big fan of. I really enjoyed the Rosebud shield. Again, some fluting on the bolsters, really nice termination of those springs as well. All around, really solid knife. Now, I'm not a huge fan of trappers. I have my fair share, but it's not the first pattern that I usually reach for, but I do think this one is extremely well executed. Now, if you stayed tuned this far, I do want to show off another knife that came through the Rosecraft pass-around group that I'm actually not going to be making a video on, and that's the Savage Creek Gunstock. The reason I'm not making a video on this one is I've already made a video on it. I own this knife already, and so have already done kind of my coverage of it, but I did want to show it off because such beautiful covers on here, and they're very different than the stag covers on my Savage Creek Gunstock, and so you can see some of that variance if you reference over to that other video. But just a beautiful knife. This one also has incredibly snappy action. It really feels like it's jumping into those positions before I'm even close to getting there, and it's just super snappy and satisfying. So really solid. Mine has really good action as well, but that just stood out to me the first time I opened and closed this one, how jumpy it is. But would love to hear your thoughts on the Cockleburr Creek Trapper down in the comments below. Again, I'll make sure to leave a link to where you can find it in the description of the video if you're interested in picking this one up. As usual, if you enjoyed the video, consider liking, commenting, subscribing, checking out some of my other content, and I hope you have a great one. Take care.